Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the July 2024 edition of Epic Insight. This is Joe Corona. I'm the Director of Sales and Strategic Partnerships at Epic Retirement Plan Services, and I'll be the host for today's call. Today's workshop will highlight how fiduciary governance is crucial to the successful operation of any retirement plan, and how fiduciary considerations can be incorporated into the development of your practice and prospecting strategies. You'll get insights from Dimensional's Retirement Advisor Benchmarking Study, and we'll be introduced to a new resource that can be utilized in these efforts, the Dimensional Fiduciary Resource Guide, which offers prevailing fiduciary considerations for retirement plan fiduciaries. We will also discuss practical ways you can effectively implement this tool in your practice today. And to help us navigate this incredibly important topic, we are happy to have our colleagues from Dimensional Fund Advisors help us out. And with us to lead our session today is Matt Stubblefield. Matt is a regional director in Dimensional's Global Client Group. In his retirement national account role, he is focused on establishing and building relationships with financial advisory home offices to help clients grow their retirement and wealth advisory practices. Having joined Dimensional in 2020, Matt is based in Austin, Texas. Your line will be muted throughout the call, but if you have any questions you would like addressed, please enter them in the webinar control panel, and we will address them at the end of the session. And with that, I will turn it over to Matt.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. Really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. As Joe mentioned, the idea behind today's webcast is to talk about fiduciary governance and how you can use some of the resources here at Dimensional to essentially help scale your retirement practice. So I'm going to try and share my screen here. Joe, are you able to see the PowerPoint slide?
No, I do not see it. Let me, There we go. All right, you're good to go.
How about now? You see the screen okay?
Yep, you're good to go.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. So like I mentioned, we're going to talk about how to use fiduciary governance to essentially scale your practice. And to do that, we're going to start with the defined contribution landscape, just looking at what the landscape looks like today. We'll then go into, as Joe mentioned, our DC Advisor Benchmark Study, looking at what are some of the top retirement advisory firms in the industry doing differently compared to everybody else? And how can you take some of those learnings to help you scale your practice and really differentiate your value for clients? And then we're going to spend the remaining portion today going into one of our more popular resources here at Dimensional, our Fiduciary Resource Guide. And we'll talk about ways you can utilize this guide, both for your advisory practice as well as for plan sponsors and prospects that you're out there meeting with in the industry and around the country. So if we just start here, we're looking at the latest publicly available data for the retirement industry. And this is pulled from Form 5500 annual reports. You'll see this is as of 2021 filing year. This is actually the latest publicly available data. There's typically a little bit of a lag in the data. But you can see here there's over $13 trillion currently in the retirement space. And the bulk of those assets, about $9.5 trillion, are in the defined contribution landscape. And you can see this defined contribution landscape as well makes up the bulk of the retirement plans in the industry. You can see over 718,000 plans. So if we dive a little bit deeper in the DC landscape specifically, you can see here that certainly the bulk of the assets are in those larger plans. So those retirement plans with more than 100 participants. But we also can see that there's still $1 trillion of opportunity for advisors to go out there and prospect and effectively market their services, their values to small business owners that have less than 100 employees in their retirement plan. And you can see here the bulk of the plans in the retirement space, over 630,000 of those DC plans are in those smaller employer markets. So as you're thinking about this fiduciary resource guide, certainly think about ways this can be implemented both for large clients as well as small clients, but wanted to highlight the opportunities certainly in the small business area. And then for any advisors on the call that maybe are more wealth focused or are looking to get into the retirement space for the first time, we did want to offer just a few reasons on areas where we've seen advisors launch retirement practices and why they're doing so. So the first is that small business opportunity we just talked about. And the shocking thing is, of that $1 trillion of opportunity, there's still 2/3 of small businesses in the US that actually currently do not have a retirement plan. So certainly a lot of opportunity for new retirement plans working with those small business owners going forward. And we're certainly seeing legislation, Secure Act 1, Secure Act 2 coming out that's really incentivizing those small businesses to essentially launch a retirement plan. Second, wealth management leads. So any advisors on the line that maybe have a wealth practice as well, launching a retirement plan practice is a great way to build your pipeline for additional wealth management opportunities. Now, our DC Advisor benchmark study, which we'll go into in just a little bit, we found in that study that on average, the typical advisor generates about 5 wealth management opportunities from their retirement plan book of business. So certainly a lot of opportunities to grow your wealth practice as well. Thirdly, enhancing your client relationships. It's another great way to build relationships with your current clients and on the wealth side or any areas, lines of businesses, and then ultimately help some of those clients potentially launch a retirement plan. Maybe some of those clients are small business owners themselves. Maybe they can refer you to other business owners. A great way to enhance client relationships. And then fourth, and certainly not least, it's a great way for advisors to diversify their revenue source. So when you think about a DC plan, the nice thing about DC plans is that over time, because of the ongoing contributions in the plan, there's always positive cash flows occurring. And if you look at the latest study from a couple of years ago, you'll see that $85 billion actually flowed into DC plans in that small market alone just over the course of the year. So certainly a great way for advisors to diversify their revenue source compared to some of their other practices as well. Okay, we're now going to focus and turn a little bit to our DC Advisor benchmark study, which I spoke about just a minute ago. So we actually run one of the largest advisor benchmark studies in the industry here at Dimensional. And our latest study, which came out in 2020, we're actually running a new study right now that should be coming out in the next few months for 2024. So please be on the lookout for that. But our latest study, essentially what we did is we had over 100 RIA firms participate in the study. And essentially what we did is we looked at, okay, what are the top 25% of advisory firms doing differently compared to everybody else in the industry? And most importantly, what can everyone else in the industry learn from some of those top growth firms? So if you look at some of the statistics from our advisor benchmark study here, you can see that those top 25% of firms, well, on average over the course of that 2-year period, they generated about 17 new retirement plans. Now, this is on a net basis, so they might have won 19 plans, might have lost 2 plans, but on a net basis, 17 plans. You compare that to the other 80 advisors, the rest of the industry that participated in the study, on average, 0 plans. So again, might have won a plan, might have lost a plan, but significantly more growth for those top 25% of advisors. And then not too surprisingly, if you look at growth in assets, growth in revenue, assets under administration, and then annual revenue, all significantly higher for that top 25% as well. So as I mentioned, we really wanted to look at this data and understand what are those top 25% of firms doing that is really differentiating themselves in the industry, and how can other advisors utilize this data and these findings to hopefully increase their value proposition and differentiate themselves in the market. So I think one of the greatest takeaways that came from the study was we asked the participants, at the end of the day, why are plan sponsors hiring you as a retirement advisor? And what we did is we broke out the responses from the top 25% compared to everybody else in the study. And far and away, number one for everybody in the study, both the top 25 and the rest of the study, was probably not too surprisingly, but high fees. You know, there's been a lot of fee compression in the industry. Clients, plan sponsors are always looking to lower their fees if they can. So an advisor charging high fees was a big reason for clients to ultimately look for a new advisor to oversee their plan. But then number two, and the area that we'll talk about a lot throughout today's presentation, is lack of fiduciary oversight. And you can actually see there's hardly any difference, actually no difference compared to the top 25 and everybody else in the study. But lack of fiduciary oversight was a clear number 2 winner for why a client or plan sponsor or prospect would look for a new advisor for their plan. And then thirdly, poor record keeping, TPA servicing. Of course, we never get that from our friends here on the line from Epic, but this is certainly another reason for clients to make a change. But if you look at those top 3 reasons, fees, lack of fiduciary oversight, and then poor record keeping, there's really not a significant difference between the top 25% and the rest of the study. But what really stood out to us here at Dimensional was that fourth item there, participants off track for retirement. And as you can see here, there's a big difference that the top 25% of firms place on ensuring that employees of a firm, if they're off track for retirement, helping them get back on track for retirement. And at the same time, helping business owners, plan sponsors, et cetera, helping them with education to understand which of my employees are off track for retirement and what resources can I give them to ensure that they get back on track for retirement. So when we think about value proposition, this is certainly an area where the study and the data that we looked at, this was a huge area where the top 25% of advisors certainly differentiated themselves in the study, was helping participants that were off track for retirement get back on track for retirement. So if you look at, if you look at areas for building a DC value proposition, here's just a few ideas we threw out there that can hopefully help you as you're thinking about increasing your value proposition, again, differentiating yourself from other advisors in the industry. We came up, using that study that we just looked at, we came up with 4 items that potentially an advisor could utilize. Now, this certainly is not meant to be prescriptive by any means, but really just a way for you to think more about how you want to differentiate yourself in the industry. So the first one, again, helping participants improve their outcomes. Perhaps you want to focus more on financial wellness. Perhaps you want to offer more personalized advice, whether that's either through managed account solutions or other customized personal advice offerings you can offer to clients. And then how do you want to communicate to your clients? Obviously, how you communicate with your plan sponsors, how you communicate with prospects, going to be very important. So talking about ways that you can help their employees get back on track for retirement, a big differentiator for sure. If we go over to the right-hand side, lower costs and reducing taxes. Now, obviously, this is something that every business owner is going to want to do. And there's certainly, Secure Act 1, Secure Act 2 coming out that's certainly looking at giving tax incentives to small business owners to launch a retirement plan. But perhaps you do things like offering plan design consultation. Maybe your ongoing fee benchmarking. You have software and services you can look at to benchmark your fees relative to other advisory fees in the industry. Perhaps you offer low-cost investments, whatever it may be, but just ways you can help business owners lower their costs, save more, help their employees save more, and then ultimately reduce taxes on the business itself. Third there in the bottom left, delegating more plan tasks. So we talk about this a lot in our Retirement Plan University series, but basically the idea of the advisor being the quarterback that oversees all the service providers and everything going on in the plan, and how you can leverage some of the partners, providers in the industry that you work with to really delegate some of those plan tasks, to essentially remove those plan tasks from the plan sponsor, but also remove those tasks from you, the advisor. There's also vendor selection, you can oversight of the service providers, et cetera, all responsibilities that you, the advisor, can do to help remove some of those tasks from the plan sponsor, and then also away from yourself as well. And then fourth, and finally, managing risk, reducing liability. Something that obviously every business owner is looking to do as well. But how can we systematize this, the decision making, the oversight process? How can we go about executing what we're looking to do? How are we going to monitor things over time, whether that be an investment policy statement, et cetera? These are all ways that you as an advisor can help the client or the prospect manage their risk and ultimately reduce their liability. So again, certainly not meant to be prescriptive by any means, but hopefully looking at some of the advisor benchmark study that we do have here at Dimensional and offering some ideas for ways you can differentiate yourself will be helpful for those on the line. But now turning more to the fiduciary governance piece, we did ask this in the study as well, is where are the top 25% of firms investing compared to everybody else? And there were 3 key differences that we actually noticed in the study. So the first obviously goes along with why clients or plan sponsors will be looking to make a change. Fee benchmarking, certainly a big area where the top firms are certainly offering those services, those resources, more so than other advisors in the industry. The second is financial wellness, and I know I've seen financial wellness really take off in the industry in the past couple of years specifically. And again, you're seeing the top advisor firms in the industry really place an emphasis on financial wellness, helping clients and plan sponsors understand, not only the retirement picture, but also how the retirement picture fits into their overall financial picture. I think very important. And then third, like I mentioned, what we'll go into today is fiduciary governance training. I would say the typical question that most plan sponsors are asking to their advisor is, am I doing everything right from a fiduciary standpoint, from a compliance standpoint? And I'm worried about getting sued. I want to make sure that we're not going to running the issues down the line. So fiduciary governance training, helping clients with education, with resources, with training their employees, their participants in the plan with fiduciary governance training, I think very, very important and certainly top of mind for advisors around the industry. Now, if we go specifically into fiduciary oversight here are just a couple of additional questions that we asked individuals in the study as well. So do you offer things like committee fiduciary education training? Do you offer fee and service benchmarking, compliance oversight, committee meeting minutes, fiduciary audit files, et cetera? And you don't see a huge differentiation between the top advisors and everyone else, but you certainly see those top advisor firms, again, focusing more on those areas of fiduciary governance, fiduciary oversight. So obviously a very relevant topic and certainly top of mind for many advisors and plan sponsors in the industry. So to help you with scaling fiduciary governance, what we wanted to do is offer up one of our more popular resources here at Dimensional. And sorry, this slide is not going forward for some reason. And what you can see here is Callan actually runs a very large annual DC survey as well. And when they were asked, what are the top areas of fiduciary focus, they were governance and process. So things like investment structure evaluation, fund manager due diligence, and then fiduciary actions that were planned included things like a reviewing of the plan fees, completing formal fiduciary training, and then implementing an investment policy statement. And we get questions a lot from advisors, hey, can you help us with a sample format of an IPS? Yes, we definitely certainly have resources for that as well. But taking Callan, who obviously runs a very large survey, taking some of their findings really helped shape how we thought about launching a fiduciary resource guide as well here at Dimensional. So turning to the guide itself, we partnered with an attorney firm called DLA Piper. They're based out of Chicago to write this guide. Now, the guide itself, it's essentially built to help plan sponsors and also advisors understand their fiduciary responsibility across a variety of different topics. So the fiduciary resource guide itself has about 20 different topics in the guide. And these topics range from things like cybersecurity to setting up a retirement plan committee, to ESG, to managed accounts, to investment manager selection, et cetera. So there's a lot of detail in this guide itself. Now, each chapter, it's written at high enough layman's terms that the average plan sponsor should be able to understand it and absorb it and really understand it. But it's really tailored, I think, more so for advisors to utilize in their plan sponsor review meetings. So to go along with this guide, we also have unbranded PowerPoint slides for each chapter. So take a chapter like cybersecurity, for instance. Perhaps you have plan sponsors or prospects that are asking about cybersecurity, fiduciary governance, ensuring they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing on a cybersecurity basis. You can actually offer up 2 or 3 PowerPoint slides we have on cybersecurity. These slides are completely unbranded, so you as the advisor can actually input your firm logo onto the slides themselves. And then you actually use those slides in plan sponsor meetings to help plan sponsors understand what is the best practice, a pro tip that we can utilize to really understand cybersecurity going forward. But we also wanted to go a little bit deeper into the guide itself to really give you an understanding of what the guide is and what topics, foundational principles are in this guide. So we essentially broke the guide down into 4 different components. So a foundational aspect, applications aspect, how you can apply this guide, additional considerations, then finally an appendix. So if we start with the foundational component, this could be things like, hey, what are the initial requirements for setting up a retirement plan? How do we want to establish the plan, the framework for the plan, and then ultimately, what are going to be the roles and responsibilities of the committee members of the retirement plan? How are we going to think about education? How are we going to think about investment policy statements, et cetera? So these are all foundational pieces that the fiduciary resource guide covers. Moving on to applications, this can be things like, how are we going to address ongoing the needs of the plan? So how are we going to review investment managers in the plan, investment funds in the plan? How are we going to put certain funds on watch lists, make removals, add new funds, et cetera? All part of this guide as well. Things like mitigating liability, like we talked about earlier, QDIA selection, asset allocation solutions. There's plenty of managed account solutions now in the industry as well. And then benchmarking plan fees, certainly another area we talked about as well. A lot of information on that in this guide also. And additional considerations as well. I'd say one of the more popular areas within the guide is that first bullet point there, tips for fiduciary compliance. Now, we have about 16 different kind of high-level tips in the guide for that every plan sponsor can benefit from when it comes to fiduciary compliance. It's 2 pages long. It just goes into these 16 tips, something that's been a really powerful area that we've had in the guide. Collective investment trust, certainly another area that has gained popularity in the DC space specifically. Cybersecurity, I'd say this is the #1 issue that we've been hearing mostly from advisors, from a fiduciary component, all the cyber threats, et cetera, that are going on in the industry nowadays. This is certainly a relevant topic. And then ESG and retirement plans. I know this can be hit or miss depending on the advisor, but we do have ESG considerations in the guide as well. And then finally, we have an appendix which has even more resources for education, plan design, fee benchmarking, et cetera. But I think the one resource in this section that's really resonated with advisors is that sample investment policy statement, particularly for those smaller plans that maybe are not used to offering a retirement plan for the business. Coming up with an IPS to help these plans really understand their roles, their responsibilities, how the advisor is going to help them monitor investments over time, documented, consistent process like ERISA requires. We do have a sample IPS available in this guide as well, so please feel free to reach out. We will certainly help you navigate as well. And then finally, we wanted to offer just a few areas or a few ways that you can utilize this guide going forward. So the first area is to enhance your own advisor team knowledge. Now, perhaps you're hiring new folks on your team. Perhaps there's folks that are more wealth management focused that are looking to get into the retirement space. This guide can be a great refresher, a great educational resource to share with your team to really help them brush up on their fiduciary knowledge and ensure that they're well equipped to go into client meetings to share these resources. Second, and then probably one of the more popular reasons that advisors are looking to use this guide is to educate plan sponsors. And this could be anything from a variety of different factors, but as I mentioned earlier, those unbranded PowerPoint slides that go along with the guide, I think are a huge hit with a lot of advisors that I've spoken with is, using certain chapters that are resonating with plan sponsors, helping educate those plan sponsors at a very high level, just going through a couple PowerPoint slides in your meetings, rather than handing over a 100-page guidebook to the plan sponsor and asking them to read, which, as we all know, many folks are not, looking to read 100 pages these days for sure. Elevating your existing relationships. So again, perhaps this is a great resource to differentiate yourself in the industry compared to other advisors. Offering a fiduciary resource guide like this, offering those slides in your meetings, a great way to enhance your existing relationships and hopefully elevate those over time. And then finally, from an effective prospecting standpoint, business development standpoint, it's a great way, again, to differentiate yourself and to share these with prospects as just one of the many resources you as the advisor can offer to help really differentiate themselves in the industry. So with that being said, we wanted to close real quick on just what these PowerPoint slides look like. So here is just a quick asset allocation overview of the PowerPoint slides. And as you can see here, this section is about 10 pages long in the guide itself. So certainly a decent amount of reading, but not overwhelming by any means. But within that chapter, we have these unbranded PowerPoint slides that essentially have the key principles. So what are asset allocation solutions, a pro tip for ensuring that plans are meeting their fiduciary responsibility, and then a best practice to ensure that going forward, the plan is doing everything right when it comes to asset allocation solutions. So just wanted to give you one quick item or one quick example of what these slides look like. So Joe, I know I went on about almost 30 minutes there, but I did want to stop and first say thank you to everyone, but also see if there were any questions that came through that I may be able to address.
Yes, thank you very much, Matt. And we will open the floor now to a few minutes for questions. So if you do have any questions that you would like to run by us, we ask that you enter it into the question panel now. But a couple questions that I had, Matt, as we were getting prepared for this session, and you touched upon it throughout in terms of education and training for the plan sponsor. Can you talk about how, what the better firms are doing when it comes to educating and training their plan sponsor and specifically their committees in terms of what their roles and responsibilities are? Are they doing one-on-one trainings with committee members to explain the specific nature of their role in reviewing and overseeing the plan?
Yeah, thanks, Joe, for the question. And yeah, absolutely. From our experience working with advisors, it seems like those top advisors really, they may meet with the plan sponsor 2, 3, 4 times a year. And certainly in one of those meetings, they're really putting an emphasis on fiduciary obligations and sharing perhaps these slides in those meetings, et cetera, or at least trying to incorporate this in every meeting they do have. So certainly a big priority that the top advisors are looking at. If you look at our DC Advisor Benchmark Study, certainly those top advisors are placing more of an emphasis on fiduciary training. Now, kind of going back to my earlier point about where the PowerPoint slides come in handy is, handing a guidebook to a plan sponsor and asking them to read through a bunch of ERISA litigation and jargon, if you will, I think can be overwhelming to some plan sponsors. So I think what's really resonated with some of the top advisors and their plan sponsors is sharing those slides in those meetings, just really keeping it high level enough for the plan sponsor to understand. And if the plan sponsor has future questions, they can certainly reach out and kind of dive deeper. But I would say keeping it high level enough is very important. And I do think that's where those PowerPoint slides we have can certainly come in handy when advisors on the line here are meeting with both clients and prospects in the retirement space.
Great, thanks, Matt. One other question, I know it's in the slides, but we didn't get a chance to do a deep dive in it, but relating to documentation, one of the things that I know that we stress here to our clients is to maintain plan level documentation, whether it's their adoption agreement, plan amendments, SPDs, any notices. Can you talk about what the Better Advisors are teaching their teaching their committees in terms of documentation and documenting their meetings?
Yeah, no, great question. Super important point, especially when it comes to, we get a lot of questions on that investment policy statement. Like I mentioned, obviously, Dimensional being an investment manager like ourselves, we're looking to help advisors, with the documentation process, ensuring they're following everything from an ERISA standpoint. I would say that when it comes to documentation, what ERISA requires is that you're documenting the meeting notes after every meeting and that you're following a consistent process over time. And I think to be able to do that, you really do have to take, detailed notes from every meeting, any questions the plan sponsors are asking, any areas of focus going forward. And then when it comes to the investments, the interesting thing is, like I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of plan sponsors are worried about, getting sued or running to legal issues if they choose the wrong investments. Well, ERISA actually doesn't really state or penalize plan sponsors for choosing investments that underperform. Now, what they will penalize and go after is plan sponsors that are not documenting a consistent investment manager selection process. So really having that process documented, ensuring that plan sponsors are, helping or working with the advisor if it's a 321 capacity, to ensure that the advisor is documenting a process over time. They're following that process to place funds on watch lists, et cetera, over time. And then ultimately, what's the process for changing or removing a fund in the lineup or adding a fund in the lineup? So really just being detailed when it comes to what that process is the requirement for ERISA. So I would just, again, reiterate that the importance, to your point, Joe, of tracking meeting notes, but also ensuring that you do have that detailed process in writing and that you're reviewing that process, amending that process every meeting that you have with the plan sponsor and the retirement committee.
Great, thank you, Matt. A question came through the question panel. Are the slides and the guide that you walked us through within the presentation, are those available on the Dimensional website?
They are. So we have a website here at Dimensional called mydimensional.com. And that is essentially our advisor portal for all advisors that are looking to work with Dimensional. So if you do have access, feel free to go to mydimensional.com. In the search box, you can type in retirement collection or just retirement. That'll take you to all of our retirement resources. You'll see the fiduciary resource guide right there up top. If you don't have access to the site, please feel free to reach out to myself or to my team. You can see our email link here, and we will certainly get you set up with access and then also send you over the guide. And Joe, I'm glad you brought this up as well, because we have a PDF version of the guide, but then we also have a hard copy of the guide. And believe it or not, we do get advisors that ask us for the hard copy quite frequently as well. So if any advisors on the line would like a hard copy of the guide also, more than happy to ship that out to your office. Just please, again, feel free to reach out to myself or my team. We'll get you over the materials. Absolutely.
All right, so that looks like that is all for the questions that we have for today. We'd like to thank Matt Stubblefield and Dimensional and you for joining us for this Epic Insight webinar. As a reminder, we will be sending out a copy of today's presentations, and Matt also shared with you how you can access the information via Dimensional's website. As always, we wish you safety and health as you support your families, colleagues, and clients. Please don't hesitate to contact us if there's anything that Epic Retirement Plan Services or Dimensional can do to support you in your efforts. We thank you, and we look forward to having you join an upcoming edition of Epic Insight.